So we have the Reggio Emilia approach, and this is a quote that I found. It's just, our task regarding creativity is to help children climb their own mountains as high as possible. The history, this is the guy that founded the approach. His name is Loris Malaguzzi. And then the reason that it was named the Reggio Emilia is that it was founded in the city of Reggio Emilia, Italy. Their assumption was that people form their own personality during their early ages, and that they're endowed with 100 languages, which we'll talk about later, for which they can express their own ideas and be creative. They aim to teach how these symbolic languages, such as like drama, with things such as drama, paintings, and different ways of expression during everyday life. This approach is very self-guiding and should have things for children to discover new on their own times, just kind of create and do their own thing so they can learn in their own time. I found some kind of like a timeline, and so it was brought together like after World War II. There were some parents that came to Loris and said that we kind of want to try this new thing, and he was like, okay, well, let's create an approach. And the first municipal, just like public school, was opened in the 60s, and then in the 70s it kind of went out of Italy into Sweden, and then kind of skip a lot. In 2003, municipality of Reggio Emilia chose to manage the system, so they decided to do a new system, I guess. In 2006, there was an international center open for people all over and to come in. And then in 2011, there was actually a nonprofit that was open so that they could help children go to school, I guess.
Okay, so my section was the environment. And they, if you remember from the Montessori, it's very similar to that as far as the way they approach the environment. They feel it is super important. And one of the things that they actually consider is a third teacher. So there's the teacher, there's the child and parent, they kind of work together, and then there's the environment. So they see it as it is that important. And so ways that they incorporate it as a third teacher is they're always intentional with how they place the things in their rooms. So everything they have either has a purpose or they don't have it. Even the decor on the walls, they're not just going to put up a poster to put up a poster. If they can't use it, they're not going to have it. And then they also consider it a whole lot more than visual, because they consider the questions of, well, what are the visuals doing to the child's mind? So they talked about how they sat in on a regular classroom, and there were different posters and colors and stuff placed all over the room, and the person who was evaluating was from the Reggio Emilia practice, and they considered it all very distracting to the child and to themselves. And they don't, they feel like the visuals that are placed in public school have a lot of commercialized influences. So for instance, when people hang up Valentine's things, they always have baby Cupid, but what does the real Cupid look like? Or St. Patrick's Day, they'll use the cartoon leprechauns, when really that probably wasn't the intention of the leprechaun at that point. So they keep things very natural and very open to the child to be able to put their imagination to those things as well. And so then another question they consider is, how fluid is it? So is the room set up to facilitate interaction? So for instance, they may have a home play center, and then they'll put a pizza box in it, from one of the local pizza stores. And so that it encourages the kids to talk about, have you ever ate at this restaurant? Yeah, I've ate there. I like their pizza. I don't like their pizza, things like that. And then there's also a fine line between providing structure for the kids and then the free exploration. So can a bunch of 4-year-olds run around a room with no structure whatsoever? Absolutely not. But can they sit like robots all day and be expected to do exactly what we expect? No, of course. So the goal is to figure out what can they do on their own and what do they need the structure for. And then this is just kind of a picture of one of them. So you can see they have it in centers. And this center is designated just for these cutting, and then this one over here is for, looks like they're counting and things like that. And so they're just very intentional in the way they place everything. And then there's a couple more features about this that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But there's the plants and then the lamp on there. So it's very homey, and then the colors are also big because they're very natural. There's not a lot of bright colors and things like that. So the natural elements are big in the classrooms. So that's kind of why we've placed flowers and the pumpkins around here, is because they like to use plants to decorate their classrooms and things like that, because they feel like it sparks the imagination. They like to use a lot of neutral colors because, again, it keeps it natural. They won't use the bright colors. They also feel like the neutral colors are much more calming to the kids. And they'll try to use natural lighting. And so if it wasn't as cold, we would probably actually open the windows because they would use the natural air too. And a lot of the craft projects they do, they use the natural elements. So they'll use sticks to make the letters and things like that. Natural floors, they'll try to use hardwood floors and things like that. And then the pictures that they do place in their room are real world pictures of things, not like cartoon images and clip art of things like that. And they do consider the classroom a second home. And so they will display pictures of their families. So like this one, the kids each brought in like a photo of their family, and they put it in their classroom so that they would feel more at home. The student work being displayed is a major factor because it gives ownership, as we've read about several times throughout the semester, and they're very big advocates for that. They will use floor lamps and things like that instead of using like the typical fluorescent lighting and things like that. And the children do have personal space at different times. Of course, they have their own cubby and things like that, but then there are also, corners that they can go to be alone and things like that when they want to be. There's also mirrors and things like that so they can see themselves, and then also it just adds kind of a homey effect to it. And then the environment is very child-centered, so everything is going to be at the child's level. They're going to use the small tables and chairs. The centers are going to be the smaller shelves and things like that. And also the children can reach everything that they need at the center. The teacher should not have to get anything done for them. And the pictures that they hang on the walls, they're hung at their level. So you can see kind of the mirrors in this picture are very low, and then also the board, and then you can see how small the shelf, and even the little couch thing, the green couch thing, is very low. So everything that they place is focused around the child. And so there are 8 key principles that they consider to be important in the environment, and this came from the article I read. And so the aesthetics are obviously very important, like they are in any environment. The transparency, just how well the child fits into it. The active learning, everything in the room should provoke their minds in some way or another. Flexibility, it has to work around the children and kind of what they're going for. The collaboration of how well it works together as a whole classroom. Reciprocity, and then bringing the outdoors indoors, and then the relationships that it builds. It builds between the children, and then also between the teacher and the children, but a lot of times the teacher will get down on their level. So they'll sit on the floor, they'll sit in the small chairs, things like that, just to connect with the child better. So yeah.
So I'm going to talk about adult roles in the Reggio Emilia process. Adults play a pretty significant role in the education process, but without being too pushy. So students can expect to receive support from their teachers in the classroom, an additional instructor known as the altarierista, just excuse my pronunciation on that, it's Italian, and then they also receive support from their parents. So the altarierista is a teacher that's trained in the visual arts. So they will work with students and with parents, and they also work in a studio known as an atelier. The studio has a variety of materials and tools that they can use, and students kind of use this studio as like a workshop. So they go there to work on different projects, and teachers can track their progress on different things, and it also has like a history of different projects that students have completed, so parents can go there to look and see what their kids are doing, and it's just kind of like a art function. The teacher, their role in the classroom is centered on the idea that learning is an ongoing partnership between the teacher and the child. So it kind of goes along with the idea that learning is like a lifelong process, because the teacher is going to be learning from the student and the student's going to be learning from the teacher. That being said, teachers will kind of act as a guide and facilitator for students in the classroom, but they'll usually take a step back and take observations and take notes and just let the students work their activities on their own, but also observe and see what they're struggling with or what their interests are. And so they will use these observations later on in a period of reflection, and they will use those observations to kind of form like a flexible lesson plan for each student. So because of that, there's no set curriculum that's planned in advance. It's all open to interpretation based on the students. The parents are also heavily involved. They are included in the advisory committee that runs each school. So they're really expected and supported to get involved with the students' education. They play a role in a bunch of different fields, but the main ones include day-to-day interaction with their kids. They could work in the schools, the discussion of educational and psychological issues for the students. They work at special events, they go on field trips and excursions, and they help with celebrations. And I found this quote that I thought kind of describes a teacher's role pretty interesting. It's from an article. It says, "The idea that instruction travels in a two-way direction through the collaboration between children and adults is illustrated in Louis Malaguzzi's metaphoric description of a ping pong match. Both players, adult and child, are required to make appropriate adjustments in order to allow for the advanced optimal growth and learning. A single player would be unable to participate successfully in the game." So it kind of just goes back to the idea that students and teachers are kind of collaborating and learning together.
All right, now beliefs about children, that Reggio Emilia was actually founded on a lot of characteristics that were kind of formed by Vygotsky and his ideas of social interaction having an impact on the development of children, as well as the environmental support coming from the Montessori foundation that Maria Montessori had formed. But the foundation of this kind of classroom setting is based, like was said earlier, on child-centered learning. And so it's all based on how each child individually understands concepts and takes inputs in all of the information and is able to understand things in their own special way. And so it's not based around already made curriculum, like also was said earlier, that it's all based more on what the child is learning on their certain level and how their strengths play into that as well. And so the teacher will observe the student before forming curriculum to kind of fit in with their different learning styles. So these interactions can happen in the classroom with small groups where there might be 3 or 4 children, or maybe larger groups where there's 4 or more as a class as a whole, or even individually, that they give opportunities for children to have time alone, maybe a reading corner, maybe some time just to work independently on their studies as well. So in an article that I had found on Reggio Emilia, it had said how they had observed at a Reggio Emilia classroom, and they found that the children gained more understanding of the material through group work. And in those groups that they were able to kind of show off their multiple intelligences that was found by Gardner and his understanding of how we all do have our strengths and our differences between each other, and how together we can form a greater whole, and that we can understand concepts better through the understanding of others and their strengths and weaknesses too. So another way that Malaguzzi had said this was through his 100 languages, and this is actually the whole poem that he had written right there, and I have it here and I'll read it to you. It says, "No way the 100 is there. The child is made of 100. The child has 100 languages, 100 hands, 100 thoughts, 100 ways of thinking, of playing, of speaking, 100, always 100, ways of listening, of marveling, of loving, 100 joys for singing and understanding, 100 worlds to discover, 100 worlds to invent, 100 worlds to dream. The child has 100 languages, and 100 more. But they steal 99. The school and the culture separate the head from the body. They tell the child to think without hands,
to do without head, to listen and not to speak, to understand without joy, to love and to marvel. They tell the child to discover the world already there. And of the 100, they steal 99. They tell the child that work and play, reality and fantasy, science and imagination, sky and earth, reason and dream, are things that do not belong together. And thus they tell the child that the 100 is not there. The child says, no way, the 100 is there. So this is basically explaining how we all do have our unique qualities and how that's kind of displayed through this classroom setting, that they give opportunities for students to kind of use their different languages through drawing, through pictures, painting, sculptures. Maybe they're more comfortable with dance and movement. Maybe they enjoy role playing, that they give the students opportunities to use their strengths to learn through those languages. And another way of learning in this environment is also with kind of a lack of time, that they don't keep time on a clock or a schedule on a calendar of when they do need to complete tasks, but they have kind of an open mind to allow the children to take their time and to kind of find their own sense of how long it may take for them to complete a task or how long it may take for them to go throughout the day. And so a teacher's not going to limit them on how many tasks they complete, and they're not going to have any kind of expectation for how many tasks they need to complete in a day. And with that, finally, I'll say that they stay with the same teacher and their same peer group for 3 years, because through this learning their sense of time, the teacher also learns with them and observes how their students will kind of go throughout their day and find their rhythm of work. And so the teacher stays with them from infancy to 3 years old, and then from 3 to 6 years old as well.
Okay. I'm going to talk about program practices, where teacher cooperation is a huge part of just the program in general, and it accomplishes many things. First, the teachers, they usually work in pairs, so they go around the classroom and together and just help out with bouncing ideas off each other and maybe getting a different view of what the child is doing or saying. They also continually document everything, since there's no real standardized testing or anything like that. So their testing is through just the growth of the child. And for the teachers to cooperate, of course, they have to have a strong collegial relationship, that they get along and they have the same views and they can back each other up. The documentation, if a child says something or they discuss something, they write it down. They might display that even on the walls just to remind them. The artwork also, any artwork that they have. And then the projects, we're going to talk more about the projects, but the projects will be put into view also. And all of these things, the artilista, they and the teacher will put all of the documentation on the walls or just in view for anyone to see them. And that's because, so the parents, when they walk in, they can see their child's growth. The teachers can just, a reminder for the teachers to see the child's growth. Also, other educators, I mean, the teachers next door or whatnot, they can come in and see what we're doing, and they can see how they could share ideas. Also, it shows a student that their effort is valued, because, I mean, if a child makes this beautiful project and then you just throw it in the trash, that's not going to lift their esteems at all. And so if it's a small thing or if it's a big thing, they're going to display it to help show that they care for the student and they care for their growth. Also, the documentation, it just creates an archive to put everything together. The curriculum and practice, like they've already discussed, there's no set curriculum,
but they do have age-appropriate curriculum. So like it says, it's not established in advance. So if a child starts up a project, then, which the projects can, it said like, the projects can last from 3 to 3 weeks long. It can just keep going, and however, if they're still learning, then it'll keep going. The curriculum is made through teacher hypothesis. Oh, okay, so the teachers, they kind of have to guess where the projects are gonna go, because the kids don't have all of the material, so they need a little help to keep it going and such like that. So the teachers just have to make a hypothesis of what's gonna happen next and what they're gonna want to learn next, so they can have the appropriate preparation for those things. The curriculum is, usually projects are from the curriculum, but in this case, the curriculum is from the project. So whatever they're gonna learn that year is from what the students are learning in the projects. And they said that projects are the backbone of their curriculum. And the project approach, which we always saw that demonstration, actually the project approach comes from the Reggio Emilia's roots. So of course they incorporate that in the Reggio Emilia. So the purpose of the project approach is to to get answers from their questions. So that's what the projects achieve. They also are big into diversity and disability. They don't just put aside this disabled, they're big inclusion advocates. Like Montessori, they value respect on a very high level. So they listen to the children, they listen to the teachers, they listen to the parents, and they all listen to each other because they know that everyone has something important to say. The inclusion factors are encourage collaborative relationships. So say someone was acting up and they don't do well with another student, you probably shouldn't put them in a project together or something like that. 2 is constructive, effective environments. So make it a respectful environment, make it a homey environment like they do with the flowers and the naturalness. And 3, developing project-based curriculum, which I already went over. And that helps with disabled students, because instead of just standardized tests, disabled students are not going to test as well as other students. So with the project approach, everyone is shown that they're learning. Everyone sees the growth. And then documenting learning, like that said, like instead of just testing, you see the documents and that kind of growth instead. I read an article. It says, "She is Our Little Sister, and it's Reflections About Inclusion" by Nora Thompson. And a couple of key things that I liked about that article were that Reggio Emilia, they don't say these are special needs. These aren't kids with special needs. They say these are kids with special rights, which I thought that was very interesting, because just that one word really shows how much they respect everyone. And then they say that educators need to be knowledgeable in special rights. So for every teacher needs to be knowledgeable about being able to help the special rights children, not just other children, because they're going to be in your classroom too. So you need to be educated and good with that. And then the smart pairing, like I said, like she used an example of a disabled girl that was very sensitive to sounds and would get very hysteric if there was loud sounds or whatnot. So when they paired them up, then they paired them up with like a girl that was very shy and very quiet. So they're gonna mesh well. And then the educators can learn from parents, therapists, and even the child. Again, we need to listen and respect everyone, and because everyone can help us help the students. And here's my favorite quote from that article. It says, "I wonder why we, as teachers, feel the need to intervene and explain so often. I think if we stood back and observed, we would see that the children are able to accept and include the others very well." So she's just saying that with the whole inclusion, we don't need to point out who's different and just make everyone get along. We need to just sit back and watch their social and developmental skills grow through each other. So I like that a lot.
So a lot of the activities we have set up, they all have to do with art in some way or another because, again, that's kind of what the Reggio Emilia focuses on. But it's not exactly the art side that they focus on as much as it is that they want the children to be creative in the way they see things. So they don't want the outside to influence the child's mind, but they want the child's mind to explore it. So at each section, this section is kind of our history section. So it's the first Thanksgiving, and basically it tells the story and then it asks you to illustrate it. This one is the science section, and it's talking about the seasons, and so you get to take the watercolors at this station and just kind of paint each season and kind of what comes to mind when you think of that season in particular. This is the reading one, and there's a story on the bottom of the paper, and then you get to illustrate the story at the top with the materials that you choose. And then this is the writing station, and so you're going to spell the word leaf, and then you're going to write it and color it, and then she also has where we can spell it out with the big letters on this table. And then this is the math section, so you're going to count it out using the leaves and the sticks and things like that. So the way that we're going to approach it is we're going to let you guys choose which one you want to do and how long you want to take on it, and then just kind of let you explore it. And then after several minutes or so, we're going to show a video, and that'll be that. So yeah, just feel free to choose which section you want to do. Take your time, be creative, have fun.
Grab a pencil.
This sign-in sheet around so Dr. Browning knows who was here.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna read them this over because okay. Let me pull these out. Where did it go? Yes. Oh, I'm missing crayons. Do you have crayons, man? Sorry. Yeah, technically you're 36 years old, so if you need help, feel free to ask.
Fall is a month of season. Birds on the trees turn different colors like red and orange and yellow. The leaves even start to fall off the trees. I like to read a picture for each page. Yeah. Sometimes my mom makes hot chocolate all night for you to do this.
Just kind of say that we are 36-year-old classroom, and then you're going to have Larry's. Okay.
Yeah, remember your work is going on the wall when you're done, so make sure you make it nice and pretty. Yes. It's also impressive for kindergarten. Good job. We'll be helping you specifically with that. Create pictures and things like that.
So I can get it to Dr. Brown. I'm sure she'll want to know.
Sure.
By the way, she's doing great.
slip it in there after if they go there.
Just play back on.
Do I need my notes in there too?
That'd be a good idea, yeah.
Here's your next and go. Exactly. I like it. I'm sure you can do which is okay because that would be hard.
All ready for Thanksgiving?
Why don't we try to keep it just like for 3 days? I think I was struggling to except that there's that
You guys all practice?
That is going right on the wall. That's fantastic. Is he ready for the cold?
No, he was up this last weekend. They played during the Nationals, so they played in Nashville. He was accustomed to the cold weather. He's in Florida at Southeastern University.
Can she borrow your chair?
Yeah.
Now you can choose one more station before we're done.
Are you kidding me? Oh, yeah. I had to run the car because of this.
That's crazy. Doing over here. They're all so artistic. She's like
Probably takes the ornaments off though.
Do you have a real one or a fake one? I have ornaments without talking about it. They're gonna be in the floor, they're gonna be through.
Very artistic. Gotta work on those letters.
Celebrate today, Sabbath, true.
Is this a lesson?
I know, I don't.
She just was being funny. Being little. Yeah.
And you know, if you're wanting to.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no outside. So I think Thanksgiving is like March or nighttime. That time. I can't wait.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
So we have to. Okay, I'm going to. Next there's a little bit.
Alright.
Yeah, she'll get that. She's awesome.
Yeah, she's so great. I just felt like everybody wanted to see.
Yeah.
Hey, before we take it
She'll
off,
get it. I'll say something to you.
oh, there they are.
You might have to read it.
Oh, okay.
Here, we'll put it on the left. I'm like, okay, let's do one senior year. Another senior year. Yeah. I would totally use my finger
Thank you. I like this part though.
She said she was inspired by Starry Night. So that's impressive.
Yeah.
Oh, Starry Night. Yes. Oh, okay.
Why are you doing it?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Sunshine.
Don't forget it's sunshine.
I'm gonna draw like a hole. Oh, yeah. How weird that is. I have to have time to actually see the tree the whole time. Because I have.
Aaron, you picked both of them.
Let's try to stay.
I want trees.
That's all I know how to draw. As soon as I got that message, I was like panicked. I was like nodded.
I picked some person as if they were going to meet it. And she was like, oh, Friday. I was like, okay. And then I was like, wait a minute, I think these are all friends. Okay, so if you guys would just kind of stop where you're at for just a second, we're going to show a video about the Reggio Emilia approach. It's actually like a marketing video for a Reggio Emilia kindergarten classroom, which is what you guys were. Y'all were 3 to 6 year olds. And also, if you didn't notice, because Marissa was carrying around a clipboard, and so she was kind of trying to document what you guys were doing and things like that. So, yeah. So we're going to show this video, and Aaron, you have to put your paintbrush down.
Children deserve to have a school where they know that their natural ability, their natural desire to play is supported, where their ideas are actually going to become and can become part of the curriculum. After being in early childhood education for 34 years, I decided to open my own schools, and when I did, I found myself very connected to the whole idea of the Reggio Emilia practices and philosophy. A child is viewed as not only just a capable learner, but also as deserving of respect, and that their thinking is to be marveled at, to be encouraged, that they're to be seen and heard from. Children deserve that.
Turns out that you practice like you play. Those that have learn through rote learning and memorization and simply being taught at versus truly problem solving find it difficult to ideate and to create and to truly overcome some of the more difficult challenges in the working environment.
It's really important that we give our children the opportunity to problem solve, to work together in a group, to collaborate with each other. Our children are going to be expected to walk into a workplace and be independent thinkers, be able to creatively solve a problem without being told what it is that they need to do every step of the way. When you give children the chance to play and use their imagination, they can solve problems that you never thought kids would be able to solve.
So yeah, if you noticed, there were a lot of the outdoor natural elements in there. Every time they showed the teacher, there was a ton of artwork and color going on around them and things like that. So, but yeah, that's the end of our presentation. So if you guys want to, finish your artwork, I mean, I know Erin does, but anybody else, go for it. But thank you guys for being here, and yeah, have a good Thanksgiving.